Good evening! We're gonna have another strange night, strange normal. You know, I found something that just kind of superseded everything else that we've talked about in this channel. Something's happened recently, and I missed it. I'll be the first to admit it. But something really bizarre happened. And it was in a previous podcast on a small channel, bigger than this one, but they talked a lot about the next step in this whole process that we know is coming, and it's happening now. Yeah, they're claiming that this whole thing is part of the afterlife. We knew that was coming. Hold your horses. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Stay tuned.
The system is totally rigged and broken.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh.
Demon spirits will declare themselves to be inhabitants of far distant planets in the galaxies that are coming to warn the inhabitants of planet Earth of the impending destruction of the planet.
It is now 89 seconds to midnight. This is the closest the world has ever been.
I still think these are what people call angels. I'm dying to know what they've got to say.
Pretty severe suffering brings them.
These entities have the ability to appear in any form.
Strange Normal. My name is Bradley. We talk about the stranger things that happen in your normal life to give you a biblical understanding of what is going on, and there's a lot going on. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell icon so you're notified when things like this happen. I see you all in the chat starting early. Yeah, we're going to talk about the Mahdi. That's a big story, and I have a whole video lined up about that. I'm going to pre-record it. If something big happens, I try to pre-record it so I say exactly what I want to say, because these live streams are just spitball sometimes. I don't know. It's more about the content than it is about me. And with that said, we're going to talk a little bit about something I missed that was about a month ago that I think is significant. I've got a bunch of clips lined up that I need to just sit down and make a bunch of videos for, but we're going to talk about this tonight because this is really significant. Some big stuff is happening. I think, though, we've had quite a bit of people recently come into this. I've been doing presentations at other churches talking about this topic, and I want to make sure everyone's caught up so we don't just jump right into the middle of it, because it's a big topic. And if you jump in the middle of it, you might think that we're a little bit kooky trying to understand this whole last day spiritualism is actually what this channel is all about. We're going to talk a little bit about that and more. But I thought I'd show you a little bit of a news clip to get started before we get into the actual meat of the program that really surprised me and didn't render. That's fantastic. Okay, well, I'll render it while we start into the meat of the program then. Let's talk about 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 10, as we always do. This is the Bible verse that keeps coming back over and over again. 2 Thessalonians 2, 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 10. I wrote the verse up here, and I didn't actually write the Bible verse. It says, "The coming of the lawless one is in accordance with Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, to all deception." I'm reading it from memory because it's not up here yet. There it is. "The coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with how Satan works." This is a terrible version. What is this? Oh, the non-inspired version. Let's change that. NKV. Okay, search. Good. There we go. All right, scroll down. And I'll display on the screen. The coming of the lawless one is in according to how the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth that they might be saved. So what is happening here? Well, we all know. We've talked about this before. And this is going to be a big, significant change in how people understand reality. But there's no change that happened. It's just how it's been redefined, because Satan's magic, his magic is redefining words, basically. And so the Vatican has been deeply involved in this. They haven't really come out and said that yet, but I have a feeling with the new Pope that's coming out, they're going to say a lot about it. I should just pop that up here and just play it through the player so you guys can see it. Because what happened was something didn't get rendered out like it should be. And we have a Vatican clip. Oh, you know what I can do? I can pop it in without we're re-rendering it. That's what I'll do, everyone. So I'm flying solo tonight, as you can see, and it feels a little bit discombobulated because I flew in here at the last moment. But I got a really good show lined up that I want to show you guys. And everything is out of place. All right. Well, I'm looking at my other screen over here, and we're going to re-render this. Maybe I'll cut this part out while we're rolling up here. There it is. All right. So right-click, we're locate and explore, and pop this into the player so you guys can see it right here. Edit items. Right into too many screens. There we go. And save. Banfield, News Nation, as always. Watch this. Play.
A while back, News Nation reported a claim from a Pentagon whistleblower that back during World War II, Pope Pius XII tipped off the U.S. government about the recovery of a partially intact UFO that Benito Mussolini's Italian government had discovered. So will the new Pope open the vault and share the secrets below the Vatican? I'm joined now by the host of UFO Witness on Discovery Plus, Ben Hansen. Ben, it is so crazy to think that there is a nexus between the Vatican and UFOs, but that's something that was actually discussed in testimony before Congress.
Yeah, it sounds like it's straight out of a Dan Brown novel, Da Vinci Code stuff.
Yeah.
Is the Catholic Church involved in a cover-up, something they don't want their membership or the world to know? David Grush comes out and he talks about this 1933 case where supposedly the U.S. military was tipped off, like you said. They come in, take this UFO, this object, take possession of it at the end of World War II. And allegedly, the Catholic Church has not only records of that, but perhaps going back to centuries, documentation of UFOs or perhaps alien visitation.
So here's what, if P then Q, I'm thinking, why would they keep everything a secret? Because if, their followers, their congregants, they're beyond Catholics, if people start to realize that it's not an Adam and Eve story and it's not just Earth and there's a lot more to it, there goes religion.
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head, that theory, because the idea is the same, concept perhaps that you talk about. Perhaps was Jesus married? Did he have children? The canonical, doctrine of many religions is very kind of set in stone. And so to go back and kind of rewrite history and to say, okay, well, perhaps not only we're not the only ones in the universe, but what if they don't look like us?
Okay. I got to bring it back right there. Let's stop it at 2:16 and continue, because there's more to that clip. This is only a third of the way through. Notice what they want to do, and I'm not saying they. I hate this when people say they are typically referring to a political party, a group, a Illuminati or something like that, some human. And I don't refer to that, because I believe that the majority of people are deceived. When I say they, I'm concerned about deception. I'm talking about the specific deception of the spiritual realm. They are demonic entities. What are they trying to do here? Well, what they are trying to do is say, look, everybody, this is going to change religion. You must change. It's going to change everything. This is the predictive programming that's happening with this news and many others. They've said this over and over again. This is going to change religion. So when it does happen, people are like, oh, yeah, this changes everything. Yeah, the news has been telling me that for years. And so I think that's what you keep hearing this over and over again. It doesn't change anything. We've been told this through Scripture. It's just people don't read the Scripture and know that this is coming. You know, there's a huge talk going up in Maine right now. Maine, one of the states in the United States. And they mentioned strange normal. I'm not going to call out the person and say, oh yeah, thank you, so-and-so. But because, you know, I want people to talk about this. I don't want people to be identified just because they mentioned the program. But I think it's such an important message. I wouldn't be doing this for 3-4 years just because I wanted to. I think this last day spiritualism stuff, this is at the peak in line with looking at Vatican and saying, what's going on over here? The two big things, worship and spiritualism, are what's going to be the big deception of the last days. And that's why it's so important that we talk about this topic more openly before it does happen. Anyway, you guys have heard me say that over and over and over again. Let's continue into the news, because that's what you're here for.
Right. You have, scriptural reference to making God in man's image. So what if they don't really look like us? Would that mean that people lose their faith? Would that mean that they're going to kind of panic and give up on religion? And what about the authority of religion and membership? So all those questions is kind of what the theory is as to why perhaps they believe that either people are not ready for this or that they should indefinitely keep it covered up.
Or you have to rewrite a few books to incorporate the universe instead of just Earth, But I am curious about the official position that the Catholic Church takes on extraterrestrial possibilities.
Well, it kind of depends on who you talk to, right? So the keeper of the records, or the secretary to the prefect of the archives, has come out and said that they absolutely they don't know where Grush got this idea. They said they don't have any documentation of extraterrestrial life, and they're dissuading researchers from asking anymore. So there's kind of like a process, sort of like filing a Freedom of Information Act. You can petition the Vatican, see what they say. Will you let us into your archives? And they're saying, stop looking for it. We don't have any of that here. Now, I personally do know of people who have had access to archives. And I do know, according to them, that the Catholic Church has kept records of things such as demonic possession for centuries, very detailed records. But as to the UFO subject, that's more of a mystery. Like you had mentioned in the beginning, 50 miles of shelving, they probably don't even know what they have in there. And I highly doubt it's digitized.
That's my assumption. Yeah, I highly doubt it. Yeah, looking at the books, they're almost falling apart. I only have like 30 seconds left, but is there any hope that the new pontiff might be a little more transparent, might open up the archives and let people take a look-see?
Well, I would just say that if you look at what happened under Pope Francis, they did revise the guidelines as to what is considered a miracle, how to investigate or accept something as supernatural. And so the new Pope probably will follow those same guidelines. It makes you kind of wonder, why now? Right? Is there something about now that they think might be coming down the road as to why they have to stay ahead of it and kind of have a standard whereby they decide if something's authentic or not? So we'll see.
Thank you.
All right, that's that. And so that was interesting, right? To have the News Nation talk about the Vatican and in conjunction with UFOs. And when I say UFOs, I mean these things that are flying around in the sky that the government is seeing, these lights that aren't necessarily connected to a machine. They try to connect it to a machine, but it's not. They're seeing these 42 foot round lights in the sky, and they're like, what is this? I don't know what's going on. And when these things appear to like Bledsoe, all of a sudden this woman appears, calls herself Hathor, comes out and says, hey, we want to use you to reveal us to the world. What is going on with my lights tonight? That short connection, every time I step on it, I gotta fix that. But that is what that's all about. And so I thought I'd dig into some of these podcasts because, there's so much background I should fit in this real quick. You guys know what SkyWatcher is? SkyWatcher is something we've covered, the 2 episodes they have on YouTube right now. It's basically Jake Barber. Okay, who is Jake Barber? Jake Barber, there's so much backstory. Let's go back further. There's a group of people since Lou Elizondo came out of the Pentagon and said, we need to form a group and talk about this. You know, this is when Tom DeLonge got involved in all this stuff. And they got together and they said, look, something big has happened. And then Tom DeLonge was like, yeah, it's evil and scary. And they formed a group over here. And then Lou Elizondo said, yeah, we got to make it big and scary in order for it to emphasize it to the Pentagon so they get into this whole thing. Well, then this other group started. It's kind of factioned out into 2 UFO group of societies. And these guys say, no. Look, this is a good thing. They're great. They're benevolent. And you know what? We're going to call them down and talk with them. In fact, your government has been doing this for years. And that is when a bunch of people started coming out of the government saying, by the way, we've been talking about this and we have pulled gifts down. Gifts, that's what they call them, not crashes, but gifts from something else have come down, and we've called them down by using a form of meditation, calling them down, which is called CE5. And we're going to look into that a little bit tonight, but one of the things that Jake Barber started was this group called SkyWatcher, and he said, look, I'm separating myself from the government, and I know all these people that were at one time in the government, and we're going to do this in the private sector. Am I saying that right? Public sector, not the government. And they're saying the government's hiding it from you. They're compartmentalizing this whole thing, and now we're going to do it ourselves. And they've had some success with that. So these last few episodes, I've talked a little bit, shown clips from those episodes. But one of the people that they're using to try to obtain this stuff, these gifts, these things, whether they're an egg or whether there's some technology of some kind that, I don't know, just appears out of nowhere, floats down. I don't know how it works. I'm sure we're going to see that someday. But what happens is that when these things appear on Earth, they are whisked away and potentially, this is all hearsay right now because we haven't seen this, but I think it's going to come out. We're trying to reverse engineer it for war so we can be the best of the best country and win wars and things like that. And you know, the devil loves war. That's what why not kill a bunch of people? I'll give you gifts to kill people, no problem. And I'm sure that's the agreement. I'm going to help you out. But Jake Barber said, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to create a YouTube channel, and we're going to use psionic assets, which basically means they're going to use a form of divination to bring these things down and show you what is happening here. All right, now we have the backstory about this whole thing. And I apologize for people that are actually keeping up with this or keeping up with the channel because you guys, I'm sure, already know that whole backstory. If you don't, please tell me in the comments. Thank you for helping me understand what's going on there because I didn't know all that. And that helps me know that I don't need to jump right into this stuff. I need to provide a little bit of a backstory to this. Okay, so Post-Disclosure World, which is a YouTube channel that has had he's more awkward than me, and he talks about this stuff, and he doesn't have the right worldview, but he actually had one of the psionic assets on the program, and the asset was called James Hodgkins. So we're going to go into that. Let me make sure I'm hitting the right clip here. I'll bring up my notes. Yeah, so we're going to go into that. And the first clip is them talking about coming from the afterlife. I think that's this first clip. We'll find out. Here we go.
What are your preferred protocols when you're trying to make contact with non-human intelligence?
So it's very person dependent. And I actually, from my team, the one we use at SkyWatcher, there actually isn't a specific protocol that's used. And I know, CE5 is very popular. There's other derivations of that. I mean, for me, mine is a very open, receptive partnership. I'm basically broadcasting that, we're here in a spirit of partnership. We'd love for you to show yourselves. And then once that contact takes place, then you're able to telepathically make requests. Like, if it's at night, say, move closer to Orion, move closer to the Big Dipper, flash your lights, things like that. So that's how contact's made. But that's just for me. There's another member of my team, that classic love and light contact protocol people talk about. When this guy sits down in that chair, that's what he's broadcasting, and they show up, in a heartbeat. So it really just depends on you as an individual.
Okay, that wasn't the right clip, but you got the idea of how they actually contact these things. They it's a form of meditation. The love and light thing is a very new age concept where they reach out to these things and they say, "Hey, by the way, we want you to be close to us. Move over here. Flash your lights a little bit," which is not lights like on a car. They're actually seeing these round 42 foot or in diameter round objects. The Bible calls angelic presences stars of the heaven, and I feel like I say the same thing over and over again. But you guys know where I'm going with this, right? The stars of the heavens. Over Bethlehem, there was a group of angels that looked like the star of the heaven and led Magi to Jesus. That happened. Also, Revelation talks about a third of the stars of heaven was swept by Satan out of heaven, cast down to the earth. And so when you see these things in the sky, you know that they are angelic presences. The question is, which side are they? Well, we've determined on this channel that they're not on the good side, at least the ones that are presenting themselves right now. Let me see what the clip is I have next here, because I think they're all out of order. Something happened here. Let's see what it says.
I find it particularly wild, the idea that the components or aspects of the phenomena, because like you said, we might be dealing with many different things, but part of it might have something to do with the afterlife. That is about as mind-bending as you could possibly ever get. I mean, to me, that's more mind-bending than I can't think of anything more mind-bending than that. If that's true, how is the world going to digest that?
I have no idea. I really don't know. And when we talked about Enya and the Explorers Club, I also have a startup background, and we joke about, when you're building a startup, you're kind of assembling the airplane while it's in flight. And I think burying our heads in the sand as to what this is and saying we shouldn't explore it because we don't understand it and the potential ontological shock for humans is too great, I think is grossly irresponsible. I tend to rail against, scientific materialism, but that really goes against, everything that we have been built on since the Enlightenment. I like to think that we're seeing a kind of commingling of different cycles of humanity, wherein previously, we were very superstitious, but these experiences were much more accepted. Move on to the Enlightenment, everything becomes scientific materialism. I think now we're going towards a synthesis of these two things, and it doesn't necessarily need religion as an explanation. It's okay for reality to be a lot stranger than we accept without necessarily having to ascribe a label to it. But I do think, to your point about the afterlife, this is proof that we live on after death. And I can't think of anything more important than that, particularly, the hole that seems to exist in the West right now in terms of meaning, the crisis of meaning. And I do think the reality of our spiritual sides and the immortality of that, regardless of the paradigm one chooses to ascribe to it, that's what's so important here.
Is it proof? Is it proof? I don't think so. And I think that's a lot of people are seeing through this right now. It's not proof that there is an afterlife if you start hearing voices in your head that say, oh, by the way, I'm your mother. I'm your father that died a long time ago. How is that proof? How does that follow the scientific method? Isn't that confirmation bias about something? I see many Christians latching onto this and going, yes, I can finally prove that God is real by showing that someone is living in an afterlife. But that's not biblical. Let me dig into that real quick. We need to talk about this because the Bible actually doesn't say that you are in heaven right now. Shock! Yeah, that's true. It says that you are not, because the body, separate from the breath, is not conscious. In fact, back in the day, it says that, let me just bring you up here. This is Numbers. Numbers, follow my train of thought here. It said, Numbers 25, 1-3. Now Israel remained in Acacia Grove. And the people began to commit harlotry with the woman of Moab. They invited the people to sacrifice to their own gods, and people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel was joined to Baal of Peor, and their anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel. Okay, so they joined to Baal Peor. They were worshiping Baal, no big deal, but they were bowing to their gods. Baal was their gods. Okay, so listen to this. Psalms 106:28, they joined themselves to Baal Peor, you know that already, and ate sacrifices made to the dead. Okay, so Baal of Peor had something to do with the dead and people of the dead. They were sacrificing, almost worshiping, because you sacrifice things when you worship things. You sacrifice to the dead. They were sacrificing to the dead, which was Baal of Peor. Okay, so Baal of Peor and the dead, something synonymous is happening here. Let's continue in a different book, 1 Corinthians 10:20. Rather than the things with the Gentiles sacrificed, they sacrificed to demons. Okay, so they weren't sacrificing the dead. They weren't sacrificing to Baal. They were sacrificing to a demon that was pretending to be the dead and not to God. And I don't want you to have fellowship with demons. Okay, so what was happening here? Well, it's easy to figure out that they were worshiping demons that were impersonating the dead. Will this happen in the future? Absolutely. Revelation 16:14, for the spirits of demons performing signs which go out to the kings of the world, kings of the earth, and to the whole world to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. Fight against God. Coming in the clouds, which was all about the raw material, and that book that came out in the 80s, I think. And that was all the UFO idea of, hey, some God created the 10 Commandments, and we have to someday fight against him. This is that battle. This is Revelation in a nutshell. Revelation 16, I mean. So we can tell, because the Bible goes on in Ecclesiastes 9, was it 11, 9, 11, I forget. But it says, the dead know nothing. The dead know nothing. There's no life in them. So what's happening? We are resurrected at the end of time. The righteous go to heaven. The non-righteous don't. They appear after 1,000 years of being in heaven and thinking about this. So think about this. If there is an Antichrist that appears on earth, which this is a big deception, folks. If he appears on earth, that's not God. There's going to be Antichrist. You can't believe that he's going to be on earth. I don't care what the New Age or ufology says about 1,000 years of peace on earth. Doesn't happen. Not biblical. 1,000 years in heaven. That's biblical. That's revelation. We can talk about that sometime. I have a whole talk about that. But make sure you understand where this whole thing takes place, because there will be a coming back to this earth to be a final destruction, hell on earth, and destroyed, and a new earth created, which is the ending of Revelation. Okay, let's move on from that, because that's a huge thing. But before all this stuff happens, let me go to some Bible commentary real quick. This is really interesting. So Bible commentary says this. When is all this stuff going to take place? This ufology stuff. Well, it says, when Protestantism shall stretch her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of a Roman power, when she shall reach over the abyss to clasp the hands of spiritualism, when under the influence of this threefold union, we may know that the time has come for the marvelous working of Satan, and that the end is near. That's what's going to happen. So what's really interesting, though, is that it also says, this is interesting, Prophets and Kings says Christians should be preparing for what is to soon break upon the world as an overwhelming surprise. This preparation should be made by a diligent study of the Word of God, by striving to conform their lives to its precepts. Boy, you don't hear a false prophet say that. Striving to conform their lives to its precepts. Well, what? Study the Bible? Yeah, because the Bible, what's coming back right now is a new form of spiritualism that's not going to like the Bible at all. We're going to have another Bible burning moment in history. Mark my words, because that's what's happening. We're going to have a point where everyone is going to say, oh yeah, I actually believe something else. This isn't, I believe in the tangible. I believe in something that I can use the scientific method on. And this is more tangible than what God said a long time ago. Get rid of that thing. I don't believe that at all. I believe in what's in front of me. Because, let's go back to some Bible commentary. This is fascinating stuff. This is Second Selected Messages, page 383. It says, satanic agencies in human form. What? Satanic agencies? You mean spiritualism in human form? That's crazy. Will take part in this last great conflict to oppose the building up of the kingdom of God. And heavenly angels, both good and bad, in human guise, will be on the battlefield of action, or will be on the field of action. The two opposing parties will continue to exist till the close up of the last chapter of this Earth's history. Satanic agencies are in every city. We cannot afford be off our guard. That's not the first time she says that. Satan will use every opportunity to seduce men from their allegiance to God. He and the angels who fell with him will appear on earth as men, seeking to deceive. God's angels will also be there as men, both good and bad, and will use every means in their power to defeat the purposes of the enemy. That's last day events. So, will spiritualism become a big deal? Yeah, and it's going to become a very tangible deal. I don't know if we're actually going to be able to know who's who, or if it's just someone else walking down the street that's influencing society. Maybe they're going to become a YouTuber. I don't know. What's going to happen? I mean, stranger things have happened. That's the whole point of this channel. This is a new strange normal that's happening. But take it back a step. How is this new form of spiritualism going to be easily accepted by people that can only believe tangible things? Well, they're going to have to believe that this can happen as alien encounters. Oh, we're seeing these aliens, and over time they'll tell people, oh yeah, we're actually in line with all your spiritual religions. This is all a form of a way to God, universalism, and by the way, we love those scriptures, and we are those people. Let me tell you where you're wrong in your Bible and how it's been corrupted. That's what's happening. Burn that book. That's what's going to happen. So keep your eye out and start memorizing your scripture. You might not have it. This is your warning. You might not have your Bible. That's what's coming. So, because my clips are out of order, because it rendered wrong, let's just watch the next clip. What can be the harm in that? There we go. Or not. Okay, play.
One of my areas that I, kind of pride myself on is NHI communication. And some of the messages that I've received about what these craft actually are is more extra dimensional, if you will. Actually, the message that was used is I was told that you can best understand us as coming from what you would call the afterlife, which obviously that puts a pretty wild, spiritual component to this.
How did you receive that message? Was this during an outing where you were trying to make contact, or was it like communicated to you telepathically?
Yes. So this was actually while we were out filming for that first SkyWatcher documentary. We did a session. It was about a 2-hour session. It was a pretty long one where trying to understand these craft more directly. And actually, Dr. Gary Nolan was curious how this all worked and volunteered to kind of lead the questioning piece of, what information I could get. And that was actually there was a few interesting bits that came out of that conversation. First, I could tell we reached a point in the conversation where whatever I was interacting with seemed also to be interfered with, similarly to how the pilot was. And so I started to get very agitated. I had a lot of emotions that weren't mine. Which is kind of odd in NHI communication. I don't really get a lot of emotional transference. And I could hear a voice saying basically, stop this. And that was in a lot of distress. And then the connection ended up getting severed. And this was really as we were trying to learn more about how, frankly, we can work together, how these craft operate. And so once again, there were kind of 2 instances where it felt like we were being interfered with.
When you received the message regarding the origin, I think you said that you got the impression they're like interdimensional from the afterlife. How unambiguous or murky was that, the reception of that message? How sure are you that it was coming from something outside of you and not just your own thinking mind on its own accord?
So this is the hardest part of all this. And this is why discernment is really critical. I'll tell you more about the session that Dr. Nolan and I did. And so it began with questions like that, where this information is purely coming from within me. And you're absolutely right. If there's no way to validate that information, it's largely hearsay. So all I can do is relay this is what I told and try to be objective and independent as to what that is. Now, where things get more interesting with channeling is, Dr. Nolan was curious about how the download process would work. Is that something that we can actually do and document with Gary's scientific background? I'm a liberal arts guy. I don't really have any scientific background, nor do I have a great deal of interest in it. And so to start, Gary wanted to give me a test question. And the question he gave me, and it's funny the way he phrased it, is I'm going to ask you something I know a great deal about and you know nothing about. And he asked me to explain how an exotic vacuum object works. And so over the course of, probably 10 to 15 minutes, I was able to draw out a schematic of what an exotic vacuum object is and how it functions best we can understand. And I show this to Gary, and he turns around his computer and shows an image of a schematic that looked, very similar, convincing enough for him that there was something to this. And then from there, we started to explore and push the boundaries of, looking at more challenging problems, like problems that have not been addressed by physicists. Things like the energy storage issue in a Casimir battery. That's one of the issues we tackled. And so to your point, those channeled messages, they're interesting. There's hundreds of years of UFO channeled messages. There's the Urantia book, whatever this, IM material, set material, etc. All that's interesting. And it's, I guess it's entertaining to read, but you can't do much with that. And so that's where, this psionic asset element comes in once again, is that this is practical psi. Not so much that channeled information, but the fact that we can get reliable downloads is proof of non-local information, at least to myself.
Wow. Okay, let's pause it right there. There's a lot to talk about. What is he doing here? This is critical to find what's happening. You have to look at it through the lens of the Bible. Otherwise, we can't. If there's something in life we don't understand, chances are the answer is found in the Bible always. So check this out. Let's define what divination is. Divination is the practice of seeking knowledge of the future or the unknown by supernatural means. That's the official definition of divination. What is he doing? Well, he tested something with Gary Nolan to make sure that he was actually using divination. And Gary said, I know something a lot about some vacuum, whatever he's called, molecule. And so he said, I want you to draw and help me understand this. And what happened? Well, he was given that information through channeling, through divination, because he was seeking knowledge of the unknown through supernatural means. What does the Bible say about this? Well, it says in Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12, there shall not be found among you anyone who practices divination, or soothsaying, or augur, or sorcerer, or who casts spells, or a medium, or a spiritualist, or one who consults the dead. They lumped them all together. And interesting that they also lumped in one who contacts the dead. And I've heard Christians say this. Oh, it's okay if the dead contact me. The Bible doesn't mind that as long as I don't contact them. No, that's not what this is saying. You don't contact the dead. Number one, they don't exist when they're dead. You don't transcend into a godlike spiritual body when you die. That doesn't even make sense. Why would God come back to earth to get the people at his second coming if they're already up there? Or why would we stay in this body if we can be in a better body right now if we just, unalive ourselves? It doesn't logically make sense. It doesn't biblically make sense. And so, and that's why the deception is so big. Because everyone who believes the idea that, oh yeah, my dead relative can come back and talk to me and that's a Christian thing, the Bible's like, look, don't talk to the dead. And I don't, and personally, me, I don't care what you believe about the dead as long as you don't go and talk to them. That's the whole main point. I've had people come up to say, well, the dead, they're in heaven. And I have an emotional story to prove it. I don't care. I don't care. I'm not going to argue with that in the comments about it. What I don't want you doing, Mr. I believe that the dead are floating around in my head somewhere, I want you to believe that you aren't supposed to talk to them. I want you to believe that you can't communicate with these things. I want you to believe that you can't obtain secret knowledge from them because you're supposed to be going to your God. When you go to these things, it's idolatry, and you're breaking the commandments, which means you've broken all of them, which means I pray for your soul. This is what this means. And so I think you should be very concerned about believing what you believe about the dead. It's a salvation issue. I personally believe that. This is the critical part of this whole ufology deception that's about to happen. Okay, enough ranting. Let's go on. The dead. What did I write here? Dead heathen deities worshipped by people as dead people, God who ascended into afterlife. Oh yeah, that's the whole Bible verses. Those 4 Bible verses I go over: Numbers, Psalms, 1 Corinthians, and Revelation. I'm doing everything out of order tonight, but this is spitballing. So one of the things that this guy named Patrick, he's from Vetted. He was like, when this guy was talking on here, and he was saying, look, this is proven. It's proven there's an afterlife now. I think it's funny because there are people that are saying, I don't think it's proven. Let's go back to that clip real quick.
The West right now in terms of meaning, the crisis of meaning. And I do think the reality of our spiritual sides and the immortality of that, regardless of the paradigm one chooses to ascribe to it, that's what's so important here.
So he's like, look, this proves it. It proves it. There's another paradigm, another thing that's happening here. Let me see if I can find a better clip of that.
And they show up, in a heartbeat. So it really just depends on you as an individual.
No, that's not it either.
I find it particularly wild.
Okay, let's go on to this guy. He's like, look, I don't believe that. I don't know what to think about it because he's not Christian, but he also doesn't have the same worldview and understanding this through the Bible. Listen to what he says.
I mean, I hear what he's saying. It's going in one ear and it's staying there, but I don't agree with that at all. This is not proof of us living on, forever, right? Immortality. Again, nothing's defined, right? And that's his interpretation, right? And seeing, I think that's the problem, right? Again, I'm so confused by the definition of afterlife, right? What that means. What are you saying? Proof of what? Right? So I hope that they're able to provide definitive proof on a global scale to scientists and get this proven. If this is real, then great. But until then, I'm definitely skeptical. I'm not ready to cross the finish line. All right? I'm not ready to celebrate until I cross the finish line. Let's put it that way. Right? Not going to start celebrating early. Yeah, this is proof of this, proof of that. Not really. Right? I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking about it wrong. It is interesting to think about. I see a lot of different ideas converging, and I do love the conversation and the topic. And to be honest with you, I would love to have James on and have that discussion, right, about this afterlife. Like, what exactly does that mean?
I think I'm glad he's using his head and using his noggin there, because I agree. This doesn't make a lot of sense. You're not defining everything properly. You can't use you can't say that it's the afterlife when you know that these things are deceptive. Even Jacques Vallée says these things are a little bit deceptive. They've done some pretty wild things, and so why would you think, oh well, this is definitive proof when these things are lying? And that's why Christians call them lying spirits. Let's see the next clip. What could it be? It could be anything. Somehow this got rendered out of order, and it's causing me to not know what's next in my notes. But I'll pause it once I know what's about.
Do you think that I don't know what the correct term is? I've heard HEIS, I heard CE5. You can let me know what your preferred term is. But do you think the attempt to make contact will become much more popular in the coming months and years? And do you think that's a good thing if it becomes like a very mainstream hobby, going out by yourself or with other people, going through your own protocols and trying to engage or interact with the phenomenon?
I do think it's a good thing, and I think it will become more popular. And I'll give you a very personal example. So my extended family is quite skeptical of all of this.
Okay, all right. I got to pause it here because the clip that's out of order is his backstory on how why they're so skeptical, and they have good reason to be skeptical. He grew up in an area in the Bible Belt, and he's a Protestant Christian. He admits that on the show. He said, look, I'm a Protestant Christian. We grew up this way, and my family is from Roswell. My dad was in the military, and we grew up all around this UFO stuff. Yeah. And so he says they were very, very frustrated and very skeptical of what was going on, and so I had to bring them out and show them. This is the rest of the story.
And, became aware of, this information coming out and my involvement in it. And over the Christmas holiday, I had some family visiting and took them out and showed them the reality of this. And this is me speaking as a person that has never really been able to share this part of my life with my family, other than my wife, obviously. I can't tell you how much that meant to me, like as a person, to now have, my family no longer thinking that this is ridiculous, being like, oh my gosh, that was so profound to them and so shocking that it was very meaningful to me and to them for them to have that experience.
What was that experience exactly?
Being able to use human-initiated contact to summon an orb, within, I would say, probably 300 to 500 feet of them.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I thought he would stick on that point a little bit and go, wait, what? And what exactly happened? But he went, wow, next question. I forget his name. Post-Disclosure World is a channel that's pulled from. But This is the intro. This is the intro that we missed. I'm gonna go ahead and play that now, so you can get the backstory of this guy's Christian upbringing. Watch this.
You said on X that you learned you were psychic very early on in your life. Could you go into how that played out?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, my earliest memory as a kid is of a psychic experience. I was 4 years old. I was sitting on a kitchen countertop and I fell off at just the right angle and I hit my head, broke my arm, and then I separated from my body. I can still to this day remember, basically floating above my physical form, which is on the ground crying, and just thinking, this is an odd experience. And my life going forward from there was kind of a series of, similar, strange, anomalous occurrences. And as a child, I grew up in Texas, typical kind of Protestant upbringing, and I learned that, these are not subjects that everyone necessarily wants to hear about. Things like, having premonitions of my grandfather dying before he actually did, or, there was a large wooded area behind our house where I spent a ton of time as a kid, and I would, see things out there, various spirits, land spirits, whatever you'd like to call them. And so I just, kind of internalized this as a kid. Now, on the flip side of that, I actually grew up with the UFO topic being very front and center in my life. My grandfather was an Air Force intelligence officer at Roswell. He was first sent there on TDY in 1947 from Carswell Air Force Base. He's serving under General Ramey. So the lines kind of add up there. And then my mom was actually born in Roswell in 1950. So the UFO topic has always been, perfectly acceptable in my family. And as kids typically do, you gravitate towards the other side of that. So I was always much more interested in kind of those, mystical, spiritual experiences. And mind you, this was, early 90s growing up. There wasn't the internet. I didn't have really much of a way to learn from others as to what this was. The only real resource you had back then was Barnes & Noble's New Age section, which wasn't all that complete, let's say. So just kind of had to stumble through these things and, go off to college. And in 2003, I had my first major contact experience. I was up in Middlebury, Vermont, and there was an event where I had 3 hours of missing time, and I also was physically moved about a mile from my last conscious memory. And so to this day, that's something I'm still kind of processing. But the way it presented itself, I didn't actually immediately associate that with the UFO phenomenon. I did see entities before my conscious memory, kind of went away. But I wasn't sure what to make of it. And it wasn't until many years later, as an adult, I had a boss of mine. I told him about this experience, and he recommended Valet's Passport to Magonia.
Oh boy, there's a lot to talk about. So he first saw it at a young age. He had this duality of the soul idea presented to him, where he saw himself. Doesn't mean you've left your body. This whole thing. What probably is happening here is that these things are projecting the idea of you leaving your body into your mind, or projecting what they see into your mind. It's a form, not perfect, but it's a form of possession. That's essentially what it is. You are allowing something to remote view through you, and you are seeing what they see, which is them hovering over you. Kind of scary. And but to put that into your mind as if, oh look, I'm seeing myself because I must have fallen and hit my head, doesn't make sense. It doesn't make logical sense. It doesn't make logical sense. It doesn't make biblical sense. And so that's why this whole idea, this whole religion has been formed out of this whole thing. All right. So, and then he goes on to say, look, I've been growing up in a very different way. I've been growing up as Protestant Christian, working in ufology, as both my parents were in Roswell. And for those of you that don't know, Roswell, New Mexico was the first 1940s big deal that happened. That's the whole clip at the beginning of this program, where we had the News Nation talking about how the Vatican has kind of been involved in 1933 and something was going on back then, and they might have articles that talk about this stuff. And then we pulled scientists over from Germany that were in the Nazi war that were playing with reaching out to these things, psionics. And suddenly we have gifts fall in New Mexico where they were having their first, nuclear tests or nuclear development. It all kind of adds up if you really think about it very closely, because these things are the demonic entities. That's essentially what they do. They love to see war and destruction. They love to hang out in that area. They are very, very, very interested in what we're doing with our nuclear technology because it can really destroy us really easy. Okay. So what's next on the agenda here? I think my notes are finally lining up here. That was the intro, growing up in a Protestant family. And he's going to talk a little bit about how Christians are concerned about this. And should they be concerned about it? Listen to what he says about this. This is. I thought this was fascinating.
You said on X that you learned you were psychic very early on in your life. Could you go into... Recently, it was reported by Ask a Poll that Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee, he's concerned that UFO whistleblower Jim Baker is a plant. Jake Baker, excuse me, is a plant. And then I saw someone comment and say that he perceives that religious people, as Tim Burchett is, tend to feel a little squeamish, if you will, about the activity of summoning UAP. Do you think religious people should be concerned about it? Is it are there dangers? Are such endeavors problematic for their spiritual beliefs and faith? How do you unwind that?
All right. Before we answer that, I'm going to leave a cliffhanger. If you enjoy this, and if you want some commentary and the understanding through the Bible about this stuff, and you think this is important as it pertains to last day events, as they say, eschatology, which is the study of last day events according to Bible prophecy, and understanding this stuff from the spiritual standpoint through the Bible, the lens of the Bible, join Patreon, patreon.com/strangenormal. And for the cost of a sit-down restaurant once a week, you can be a member of our Discord, our private community where we discuss this thing 24/7, and it helps fund this. Because right now, what I really need in this channel is the ability to make short videos out of these long ones that I do. I have just enough time in a week that I can make and research one video I found, and what I need somebody either. I have very little that monthly income from this Patreon, not enough to even pay one income, and so maybe someone that is based in another country, Philippines, India, somewhere else that is able to do this. I will pay you to help edit these videos. And if you know how to do some video editing, I just need something chopped up and so we can put it online, put a bumper on the end so people see, oh, that's an interesting video. I should go watch the full thing. I don't have time to do that with everything that I'm doing. And so if that's you, maybe you can help out. Or if you want to do that and you have some time, maybe God's blessed you with your abilities to edit and some time on your hands, then reach out to me, Bradley@strangenormal.org. And I would love it. I really need some help with the video editing to chop these things up. Or just join Patreon, patreon.com/strangenormal for a reoccurring Discord payment. That's why we can, so we can continue to do that collectively. Because I think this is an important topic and we need to talk about this a lot more. It will help grow the channel. All right, let's find out what he says about religion. Here we go.
Yeah, so to unwind that, this is part of the human experience. This is reported in virtually every culture throughout the history of humanity, and probably long before we have written records of it. It's always been there. It's really the paradigm in which we choose to view those experiences and what these entities actually are. And so I think at this point, actually ascribing a belief system to what this is when we have so little evidence seems very perfunctory to me. And I know if you come at this from a Judeo-Christian background, this quickly becomes, a dualistic good versus evil. There are plenty of other cultures out there that view this as something that exists outside of material reality that we just don't often have the ability to peer into, whether that be, the jinn, the fairy, the devas, etc. And so I think we're real quick as humans to try to ascribe labels to things. And I don't think it fits very well for where we're at today. Now, as to answer your question about whether or not this is dangerous, I don't find this to be dangerous myself. I've done this for a long time. Now, the one caveat I always put with this is your own baggage as an individual can be brought into these experiences. And so if you have negative preconceived notions as to what this phenomenon is, it sometimes can manifest in that way. Now, I think the work done in order to integrate those experiences allows for a much richer experience of the phenomenon as a whole.
Okay, so did you hear what he said there? Really interesting stuff, because he said, I don't believe that this thing is negative, but you does have some negative influences when something happens that you bring baggage into your belief system that might believe that this is negative, or you have negative feelings, like a bunch of hoops, basically. In other words, what he's trying to say is, and I'm just going to say it blatantly, yeah, this has been negative for some people. Why? We're not exactly sure, but usually when people see this thing as negative things happen because they are probably religious. They probably have this idea that, oh, I think these are demonic. Demonic things are going to happen to you if you start dabbling in demonology and you know the truth. If you don't know the truth and they can deceive you, then they're going to play along as if they are your friendly spirit. That's what's happening right now. So just because you dabble in this stuff and you see this stuff as very friendly, just means you're more deceived by this. That's what this means. Okay, so here, let's take it to the next level, though. What if these things start appearing one day and they're like, oh, yeah, by the way, we know all your secrets. We've been watching you for decades. And that guy over there, the righteous pastor, he's not a good guy. And let me tell you about the list of things that he does wrong. You think I'm just being silly about this? You think I'm just pulling this out of randomness? This hasn't actually been stated in ufology yet. But in other countries across the pond, it has. But not in ufology, in spiritualism. When these things manifest themselves in people, in churches, they often say, hey, let me tell you the sins that we've been watching. Let me tell you all the sins about this guy. This is why it's going to be so important. And I haven't found the quote yet. There's some quote that I want to present in the channel that I've heard before, but I haven't been able to find it, where it talks about how at the very end, there's going to be a group of people that are all for this and all for the idea of saying this is a bad thing. Don't go worshiping these things. And then all of a sudden it flips and they're like, don't know. It's okay. Let's not talk about this. I'm just going to go hide in my house. It's at this point, I think that people are going to be like, you know what? This thing's coming at us, number one, physically, but it's also coming at us with social ramifications. I don't think I want to go spread the message that this is the Antichrist. I don't want to go spread the message that this spiritual manifestation is not really the manifestation I'm looking that is the Bible talks about. It's not the second coming of God. Because if they do that, then this thing, you're going against the grain of this thing, and it's going to be very, very mad at you. But as Christians, we don't care if we're put to death by the sword, by the guillotine, by fire at the stake. We don't care, and we know that they're going to try every single social ramification to destroy us. No matter if it's pulling things from your past, what you've said online, anything that has happened, it's going to happen. So deal with it now. Who cares? I'm gonna take it 2 steps further too. What if? This is just playing with ideas right now. I'm just spitballing. So if I'm incorrect, then tell me in the comments. But what if the amount you care about what people think about you is you idolizing yourself? You're made in God's form. You are loved, and this isn't going to be some woo-woo sermon about how you can do no wrong and this is you are perfect. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that even though you've done wrong, you are forgiven, and when you are forgiven, who cares? You're going to heaven, and the devil has no chance of that. You've done wrong, and also you should remember every single one of your friends have too. Every single one of your family has that potentially might have terrible things revealed about yourself because of what you're doing and what you're revealing about this spiritualism. The difference is they're not trying because they're too concerned about what people will think about themselves. They're too concerned about how they look. Pride. Was that the original sin? Am I touching nerves tonight? Am I stepping on toes? It's time. It's time, folks. It's time to stand up. Number one, get over your sin. And the only way to do that is by helping others. We did something at church this last weekend. I had gone around to different people just around the church vicinity, my local church. And I said, I'd really like to meet my neighbors, meet the people that are around the area. And I'm a real estate agent, so I wanted to know more about their property and stuff. This one property that was right beside the church was quite large. And I was like, man, it'd be really neat if they were moving out someday, or maybe they could give us a portion of that so we could build a bigger church. So I thought, you know what? I'll go over there and ask them about it. So I went over there, and I kid you not, there was so many bushes, so many things. I couldn't get my car through some of the spaces because it was terrible to try to get through here. There's 2 houses on this property. One was very hard to find, and the other one was right in front of me. So I pulled up. There was bushes that covered the sidewalk. There was bushes that had grown up so you could just see the roof. There was it was obvious no one lived there. And when I looked in my real estate app at the people that lived there, they were 97 and one a little bit younger. I thought, this is very bad. If I find something that I don't want to find here. Knocked on the door, no one answered. I thought, okay, let's go to the next house. So I went to the next house. I couldn't get down the driveway. The potholes were so big I was going to bottom my car out. So I started walking. And you don't know, you're in the foothills of Tennessee. You don't know who's going to come out the door with something in their hand that's potentially dangerous. And so I walked up to the house, and I got halfway there, and someone said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I go, "Hey, I just wonder if I can help you. I'm from the church next door." Oh, the most loving man came out. He was 70 years old, and he said, "I've been here since before that church was here. There was a bar where that church was, and the only person that came over to me to talk with me since that time was someone from the bar. Nobody has come over from the church." I said, "Well, how can we help you? I want to help you out." And he said, "Well, I don't have any money." And I said, "I'm not here to take your money. I just want to help you out," and talk with him about his property and stuff, which we did. We talked about that, and he was very receptive. And so as this went on, I went back to the church, told him a story, and I said, "We need to go out and help this guy. Look, you go into the Bible, and what does it talk about? It talks about how there is a good way to do things. How do you do things? Well, what is true religion? It's not going to church every day. What it is helping out. 2 things. The Bible defines it as helping others and keeping yourself unspotted from the world." I don't have time to look up that Bible verse. I'm just just spitballing tonight. But the second thing I noticed was Isaiah 58. Isaiah 58 talks about the fast that we have chosen. It's not to fast as in not eat, but the idea that when you go do good to other people, God is closer to us and he fixes our lives. That's the fast that God has chosen. So if you want to get close, if you want true religion, what you do is you go help other people. So we spent all day today. That's why I'm sunburnt and I'm coming in here very, very quick because we had a lot to do today. But I spent, me and about 15 other people spent the day on a work bee, chopping this guy's bushes down, mowing his grass. He was just one guy living on this enormous property because his mother was in the hospital. And I don't want to say too much because he, he's a good guy. He probably doesn't want me talking about him, but won't say his name. But it's interesting that everyone came out, and I believe the more you help other people, the closer you are to God, and the more God helps, because you can be close to God when you do the things that God wants you to do. Be kind to your neighbors. Help the people who can't help themselves. Do things that make it so without looking as if you are trying to do something for yourself. And we did that. We helped him quite a bit. And so I say that hesitantly because I don't want to throw my cards out before everybody, but this is just it's a game-changing idea that you don't work for salvation. You help other people, and God fills you with that amazing, amazing divinity, not that you are divine, but his divinity in you that fixes your life, your problems, everything. So, where did I go with that? What was I talking about? Well, I was talking about how you can be closer to God. Man, I had a whole point, but I hope you understood the whole point behind that. Where were we? What are we talking about? I'm off on a rabbit trail. What power do we have? Okay, so he's talking about contacting these things. Let's keep going.
Recently, it was reported by Ask a Poll. You wrote on X. Why should we wait for governments to disclose the truth when the people have the power to do it themselves? What power do we have, in your perspective, to actually get transparency of this phenomenon in terms of our knowledge and understanding without having to wait for governments to open the books?
I mean, I think there's a few different ways. First and foremost is individual experience. And all the efforts of SkyWatcher aside, my concern is that there's no amount of footage or evidence or proof that can convince everyone. Now, what SkyWatcher can do is actually, and Jake has said we're doing this, is host events to actually show the reality of this to individuals. I also think the ability to do this is accessible, not necessarily to everyone, but the people that are willing to put in the work, required to develop the skill. I think they can do this at home. And I really think in order for disclosure to happen, it's going to take a great deal of personal exposure. Once again, we can show the best footage in the world, and I think people are still going to tear it apart. I think you really need that personal firsthand experience. We're going to do our best. We have a lot of plans that are coming over the next few months, but I would, challenge people, if you're going to say that this is impossible, give it a shot first.
And see, there you go. That's what they're trying to do. And so we're going to have a lot more of this happening with individuals reaching out to these things. They want to become divinators. Divinators? Sounds like Terminators. Divinators? I'm going to make a new word today. They're going to become divinators. Diviners. Diviners? Is that the word? Anyway, let's move on to the last two clips I have of this. So what's the plan? They're trying to what's this guy's plan as a psionic asset? What's the plan forward and what they're trying to do? I thought this was interesting. Here we go.
Yeah, I know that Jake Barber in one of the interviews, I think he said something to the effect that you can persuade the UAP to actually land. Now, I know you guys had an outing and you got some interesting imagery, but from my understanding, the craft or the egg was moving so fast you couldn't see it with the naked eye. Do you think it's doable that you could actually get one of these eggs to land, or is that something that the egg would only be willing to do within the confines of some kind of aerospace company activity?
So there are numerous reports, over the past, in the 20th century, of material being gifted. Now, what the exact circumstances were for that, I am not sure. I think a lot of it was just luck of the draw in terms of, people having to be in the right place at the right time. And I think that is potentially a repeatable process. And that's one of the things that we're working out right now.
Yeah, there you go. Well, okay, so that's what's happening is he doesn't know exactly how this happened, but these things are giving things to advance society. That's essentially what I think is going to come out as the big reveal in this whole thing. Advance society to a point, because we were lobbing, cannonballs at each other for the first 5,000 years. So what are we doing now? Okay, we're flying in F-16s. That's great, but could there be something else? Could the big reveal be 0-point energy? Could it these things come and say, we can solve world hunger. We could solve your energy problem. We could do. We could show you how gravity works. Are they going to come and show that to us? Because that's what science and sci-fi. That's what they really talk about on these things. Are we being prepared for this? That we just lose our minds when they show us this, so we go, oh yeah, these things are so smart. We need to worship them. I don't know. That's what's moving forward. Where did the psionic? So this idea psionic assets, is this a government thing? Yeah, it is, and that's where it came from. So this is the final clip I have for you.
Yeah, how did the legacy program even come up with the idea to have psionic assets? Where did they get that idea? Where did that come from?
So this gets back to, a lot of the early U.S. government interest in psi. And, for the legacy program in particular, I'm going to make some speculations, but, most people don't realize that U.S. interest in psi phenomenon actually comes from the Soviets. In the early 1970s, there were reports of what the Soviets called psychotronic research. The Soviets were always much more accepting of these ideas. And so you saw, throughout the 70s, the development of programs such as Stargate that were looking at what are the practical applications of psionic abilities. And, Stargate being a remote viewing program, viewing real world targets is a great example. Now, from there, you obviously get into pushing the envelope as to what's possible. And that term, psionic asset, people have asked me, what does that mean exactly? And to be fair, I don't love the term, but the definition of it could easily be ascribed to this is using psychic abilities for real world applications. It's not just mediumship, etc.
And that's what you're paying for when you pay taxes. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't pay taxes, don't get me wrong, but I do think that we need to understand what our government is actually doing with the money. So read into that how you want. This is not a public service announcement. This is not a political affiliation statement. But I do think that no matter which party is in the seat, Democrat or Republican, we should probably know what they're spending money on. Because I'm not thrilled they're spending money on researching psionics, on researching divination. That's not cool. Not cool. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. All right, folks. If you haven't hit that like button yet, go ahead and hit that like button now, because this is the time. Everybody hit that like button. And if you're in the chat and you appreciate this broadcast, give me a thumbs up or say thank you. I want to see some motion in the chat so we can see what's going on. Lots is happening tonight. Lots is happening, and it's continuing throughout. So we got clips coming up. I got so many interviews that I have collected and I'm holding right now because I got things coming up on the weekend that I gotta use them for. But I want to make sure that everybody is is on the same page as this stuff, and we're keeping up with what's happening, because this is a big deal. It really is. We need to talk more about it. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching tonight, and we will see you again very soon. My name is Bradley, and this has been Pure Strangeness and Absolute Normalcy. Strange Normal. See you next time.
You're watching Strange Normal, where the truth is the truth.